Sir David Amess's family visit the church where he was killed. They pause to read the tributes left for the popular MP who was stabbed doing his job. At Westminster, the Prime Minister will lead MPs in sharing their memories of Sir David in Parliament, where a minute's silence will also be held.
He was my neighbour in my office. I've been here since '97. He was a proper Christian family man, a true Conservative, amazing servant to his constituents.
We'll have the latest on the investigation into Holby Ali, the suspect under arrest. And I'll be speaking to Brendan Cox, the husband of murdered MP Joe Cox, on this poignant day. Also this lunchtime, the women campaigning for better support from businesses and the government on World Menopause Day. And more success for British tennis. Cameron Norrie rockets up the rankings after his victory at Indian Wells.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good afternoon. The devastated family of Sir David Amess have visited the church where he was killed, where they read some of the many tributes left in his memory. His widow, Julia, was comforted by family members as she read some of the messages during the visit to Belfair's Methodist Church in Leigh-on-Sea. The family have said their hearts are shattered, but called for people to set aside hatred and show love. Well, at Westminster this afternoon, MPs will reflect on their loss and speak of their memories of the much-loved and popular politician stabbed in his constituency. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
Sir David Amess's wife Julia was joined by other family members this morning to see the floral tributes outside the hall where he was killed. In a statement, they said their hearts were shattered. In the place where he worked for decades, colleagues are gathering to pay tribute.
David was a good friend for nearly 25 years and, as I think has come through very clearly from the many tributes over the weekend, a thoroughly good, decent man dedicated to public service.
He was my neighbour in my office. I've been here since '97. He was a proper Christian family man, a true Conservative, amazing servant to his constituents.
How to serve those constituents when outside the layers of parliamentary security is now a pressing concern, with constituency surgeries due again on Friday.
We need those constituency surgeries, but mostly the most vulnerable people that come to talk to us want to do so in person, face to face. We need to be able to have those meetings. We need to be able to do so securely and confidently.
Do you think your colleagues feel safe?
I don't think all of them do. I think we've heard that.
At the same time, the Commons Speaker says some MPs could do more for their own security.
We have a suite of measures out there that I want MPs to take up. And in fairness, not all of them have been doing that. And what we need to do is not a knee-jerk reaction, but let us reflect on what actually happened here. What can we learn from this? What we can put in place to make it safer.
But MPs are anxious to get the right balance between approachability and security.
What we can't do is hide away. We will not let anyone who wants to intimidate us or threaten us stop us from doing our job. That's why I got elected, and that's why I'm in the job I am. And what we've got to make sure is that we have proper security arrangements for everyone.
Mostly, however, today will be about remembering Sir David Amess. Becky Payton, who worked for him in Parliament, wrote, "He taught me lots about politics, but the most important thing he taught me was to start with kindness, and the only thing that matters is how many people you help. Everything else in politics is just ego." Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
Well, of course, for many, the horror of Friday will have brought back memories of the murder of Joe Cox 5 years ago, another MP killed working on behalf of her constituents. Well, on that day, Brendan Cox lost a wife and the mother of their 2 children. Since then, he's been an avid campaigner, urging people to show solidarity and unity in the face of terror. And Brendan joins me now. Brendan, thanks so much for talking to us this lunchtime. It's been a really, really tragic few days, hasn't it? And particularly poignant for you. Jo was murdered on the street in her constituency. And 5 years later, it's happened again to another MP. When you heard what had happened, just tell us, or describe, if you can, the emotions that you felt at that moment.
I just felt very profound shock. I couldn't stay still. I was shaking. I was crying. And I think that was two things. It was one, that just that being thrown back into that situation 5 years ago of when I got the phone call about Jo, but it was also about knowing the emotion, the pain of that family and what they'll be going through. My first question was whether he had any children, and to be told that he had 5 kids. Yeah, I just thinking about what they will be going through in these days and weeks to come, my heart just goes out to them.
Yeah, Brendan, as you say, Sir David leaves behind a wife, 5 children. You'll know exactly the kind of devastation that they'll be feeling right now and what they'll have to go through in the coming weeks and months. We also heard recently from Jo's sister, Kim Lebita. Now, she's currently MP where Jo's seat was. She said that her partner actually asked her to stand down after what happened to Sir David. I mean, it's just the grim reality for those in public office now that, you know, this could be a potentially incredibly dangerous job. I mean, practically, what do we do about this now and MP safety?
I think this weekend, so many people will be having those family discussions, because families will often be the most anxious about this, and they will be telling their loved ones, don't do it. We don't want to risk our family. We don't want to risk your life for your job. Now, most MPs are so committed to what they want to do and to how they want to try to help that they will push on. To your question of what needs to happen, of course, there are immediate things that we need to do. Lindsay Hoyle talking about security, making sure those security measures are used, making sure that security steps are strengthened. But just thinking about security isn't going to solve this. What we know is that even if you have very strong security, extremists will still be able to get through from time to time. So in that context, I think the other thing that we should be thinking about is how do we make sure when terrorism does occur that we're in a situation to be able to respond to that better, that we don't give them the infamy, we don't put their pictures on the front page of every newspaper, that we don't divide our communities. The amazingly beautiful statement of the family talking about togetherness, that isn't because they're wet, woolly liberals, it's because that is the best way to defeat terrorism.
And Brendan, as MPs come together later, we're hearing more and more of them talking about the fact that they are receiving death threats on a daily basis. They're getting online abuse. What needs to happen to tackle that sort of thing as well? And it's not just MPs who have to deal with this.
Absolutely, public servants, journalists as well. And I think this is the way to see this, I think, is that these attacks, the attack on David, the attack on Jo, they're the sharpest and the worst possible violent attacks on our democracy. But there are lots of other attacks on our democracy. And every time we dehumanise our opponents, every time we call them scum or we call them fascists or we hurl abuse at each other, every time we do that, we make it harder for our democracy to work. So I think that's something that we can all take personal responsibility for. Of course, we want to engage in politics passionately. We want to point out where we disagree with somebody, but you can do that in a way which is decent and respectful and focuses on their best arguments rather than their worst, and that treats that individual as someone who you might disagree with, who you might think is wrong, but is still valuable and important. And I think we've lost the art of doing that sometimes. So I do think both on how we respond to terrorism and how we build a more healthy democratic culture, it's not just a question of what MPs can do or what the media can do. It's a question for each of us in our lives as well.
OK, Brendan Cox, thank you
very
so much for talking to us this lunchtime and for being so candid. Thank you. I'm joined now by Cajal Carrier. Cajal, you know, what more do we know about the investigation that's going on as well?
Well, the 25-year-old man initially arrested on suspicion of murder, Holby, is now being detained under terrorism laws at a London police station. Counter-terrorism officers who are now leading on this investigation have until Friday to question him. Scotland Yard have already said that early inquiries had uncovered a potential motivation linked to Islamist extremism. A man of the same name as Mr. Ali is said to have been referred to the government's de-radicalisation programme Prevent some years ago. His father was a senior advisor to the Somalian Prime Minister. Now, police are still continuing to search 2 addresses in London, searches that began on Saturday. A third search has now concluded. Investigators will be trying to locate computers, phones, so they can be forensically examined for evidence, as well as trying to determine any previous overseas travel. What they will be looking to find out is whether the attacker was acting alone and how he was radicalised.
All right, so Jill, thank you. Let's return to Westminster now, to our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan. Carl, the Prime Minister's spokesman saying the murder of Sir David Amess cannot get in the way of democracy, though.
That's right, and I think many MPs feel very strongly that a key part of democracy is being able to meet their constituents. In fact, this amazing chamber that we broadcast from, Central Lobby, was literally built so that people could come and meet and talk to their representatives. Now, of course, these days most people just send an email, but many people also use those constituency surgeries, and MPs value those for as a way of learning what their constituents think and what matters to them as well. So they are very keen to keep them with the absolute minimum of hindrance, whilst recognising that it does look like, with a number of incidents at surgeries in recent years, security will have to be tightened.
And Carl, as you referenced earlier in your report, this will be a particularly painful and poignant day there, won't it?
Yeah, this is going to be one of those very big days in the House of Commons when MPs meet here to talk about Sir David Amess. One of them coming in this morning said this place still feels very numb, and I think the debate or the tributes that we'll hear in the chamber today will be a time of great release for many MPs who are able to express what they feel about him in a time of probably great emotion, and then after they've had the chance to pay tribute in the Commons chamber, they're going to go to the church across the road, St Margaret's. Sir David Amess, of course, was a very religious man, where they will remember him further.
All right, Carl, thank you. And you can watch those tributes to Sir David in the Commons, which will be led by the Prime Minister, on our website and our social media channels. Search for ITV News. Still to come, the rest of the day's news, including the rise of Cameron Norrie, Britain's latest tennis champion.
Yeah, big hello to my parents back in New Zealand. I miss you guys, and yeah, this title's for you guys.
But first, on World Menopause Day, campaigners are calling on businesses to better support women living with the side effects of menopause. It's as Timpson's, the high street chain, says it will pay the prescription costs of hormone replacement therapy, which is currently not free in England. Well, a recent poll of almost 4,000 women found that almost all experienced symptoms that had a negative impact on their careers, with 2/3 taking time off work. Well, joining us now to talk more about this are Dr Louise Newsom, who carried out that study, and Faye Reid, who had a pretty tough time going through the menopause, but happily is emerging from it now. Guys, thank you so much for joining me this lunchtime. Faye, let's start with you. 99% of women experience menopause say it had a negative impact on their career. What was it like for you? Talk us through the symptoms.
It's a bit weird for me, really. I just started a new job. It was my first week there, and I had a hot flush. I didn't know what it was. And then it carried on, and then I realised I was going through the menopause. I was actually fine for the first year. I kind of just went to health food shop and got some vitamins. But I think it was life events which kind of tipped me over the edge.
Well, data
I had
out,
brain fog, I had severe anxiety, I wasn't sleeping, I had the sweats, and that's when I went to my GP and I was prescribed HRT.
So you got HRT in the end. Now you're in England, obviously. I think you're in East London. Did you get that free?
No. And believe it or not, I only found out last week that in Scotland and Wales, HRT is free, which kind of just blew my mind. It can add up. Sometimes women are paying £30 to £40 a month on their HRT prescription. And I often think for women on low incomes, that's quite a lot of money to pay out for. So they must be really struggling if they're not addressing their symptoms because of financial worries.
And Faye, I had a look at your Instagram account earlier, and you've posted quite a lot of pictures of you out and about there, working out in the gym, getting on with life, because you, like I said, you've come through the other side now. Do you think you got enough support, though, at the time? What about where you worked?
I had zero support. I'll be honest and say, when I first started going through the menopause, I didn't tell anybody in work. In fact, I was in my job for 5 years and I never told anybody in HR or any of the managers. I kind of just dealt with it. I told my friends, I told some of my colleagues that I work with, but I didn't tell anybody in management or HR. I think there was a fear of how I would be viewed. When I started, there was a definite negative connotation around the menopause. Your life is over, it was all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Yes, I was scared to tell them, really.
Faye, for the moment, let's bring Dr. Louise in on this point, because, Louise, this affects more than 50% of the population. Why is there still such a taboo around the subject?
There's been so much misunderstanding for many years, and we have to remember that all women will go through the menopause, but it's a hormone deficiency that lasts forever. And so many women experience symptoms, but there are health risks as well. Because so many women and healthcare professionals have been scared away from HRT for the wrong reasons, it means that people have thought there's no point going to get treatment. And for a lot of women, they feel it's a sort of failure almost to go and talk about it and get treatment, which we know is wrong, because the earlier a woman takes HRT, the better to improve their symptoms, of course, but also their future health.
Yeah, but you mentioned HRT there, which, as you say, is widely recommended to counter the symptoms of menopause. But we just heard that it's not free, where it is free in Scotland and Wales, but not in England. So that's a problem, isn't it? There's a financial difficulty there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. People at the minute in England can get prepayments, which means that it can cost about £10 a month for any number of items. But we know that other hormones are free in the NHS. So, for example, thyroxine and insulin. And it's really important. We know from some studies, 29% less, or women from low socioeconomic classes are 29% less likely to be given HRT. And these women often have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease or diabetes. So it's absolutely wrong. There's a real discrimination when it comes to menopause care. Women shouldn't be paying for menopause care. They shouldn't be paying for their prescriptions. But actually, even before we talk about HRT, women should be able to get evidence-based information. And for too long, women have been fed wrong information, or it's not been talked about. And certainly talking about it in the workplace is really important. Talking about it at home to our loved ones is really important. Being aware about the way the symptoms can affect us, and also this future risk of heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis and dementia. We know from this study that 50% of women either resigned or left their job early, which is awful. Women are leaving the workplace left, right and centre. We know also that around 40% of the NHS employees are menopausal women. So if you think 10 or 20% leave work, that's a lot of doctors, nurses, care assistants, cleaners who work for the NHS that we're
Dr.
losing
Louise,
unnecessarily.
I'm going to interrupt you just because I want to give the last word to Faye here, because as I keep on saying, she's come through on the other side. Faye, for women who are watching this lunchtime and are feeling worried and are feeling that they need to talk to someone or do something about this, just a quick message where they can get help and what they should do.
Don't hide, talk about it. Visit your GP, talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues. There's a lot more information out there these days, and don't be scared of it. It's just a normal process that a woman goes through.
Well, listen, Faye, a good message there. Dr. Louise Newsom, thank you both for joining me this lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And finally, there's been even more success for British tennis in what's turned into a bumper year for the sport. Last night, Cameron Norrie took the title in Indian Wells, often referred to as the unofficial 5th Grand Slam. Well, he had to come back from a set down, as well as a loss of his shoes, just before the match, as Sharon Thomas reports.
From Great Britain, Cameron Norrie.
He came to the Californian desert a rank outsider and lost the first set to Georgian Nicolas Basilashvili.
Untouchable.
But the second set brought a change in fortunes for 26-year-old Cameron Norrie.
It's wide.
And in the third, he battled back.
Cam Norrie is a Masters 1000 champion.
To claim victory, the first British man to win the prestigious Indian Wells title.
Open men's singles champion Cameron Norrie.
Norrie was born in South Africa to British parents, but grew up in New Zealand, where his mum encouraged him to play tennis in the driveway of the family home. His parents were watching from 6,000 miles away.
Big hello to my parents back in New Zealand. I miss you guys, and yeah, this title's for you guys.
In the post-match interviews, the new British #1 revealed a shoe crisis, referencing a similar drama Sir Andy Murray had experienced earlier in the tournament, when he thought he'd lost his wedding ring and his shoes.
Today, every day I left my shoes on top of the locker, and I think they threw the 3 pairs of shoes that they had away, and I don't know what people have against the Brits with the stealing the shoes, but I didn't manage to get them back. Luckily, I didn't have a wedding ring attached.
Well, Cameron Norrie's godmother is former magician's assistant Debbie McGee, so maybe she can make them reappear. The new shoes did turn out to be pretty magical. He leaves California with nearly £900,000 in prize money. Sharon Thomas, ITV News.
Well done, Cam Norrie. And that is it this lunchtime. Charlene is here with the evening news at 6:30. The latest news where you are follows the national weather. But from everyone here on the Lunchtime team, bye-bye.